Pitter patter, let's get at her. It is another episode of the Manely Broncos Podcast, and we are certainly excited to get a chance to talk about the NFL draft. We'll dive into it from a pick-by-pick basis, but it is awesome. There are new Denver Broncos in the building. It's also it's always fun to certainly talk about it from obviously back when we did the NFL free agency and back when now we're getting the opportunity to do it after the NFL draft. It's exciting, Brandon, because you get a chance about new prospects. You get to talk about new prospects, and there was so much buildup. Of who will be a Denver Bronco, who won't be a Denver Bronco. So much speculation of, everything else.
Good luck, Mike.
It is over with. But
dude, it was. It's. We talked about this before we started the show live. I love the draft and I hate the draft at the same time, and I love it because it's just it's so much fun leading up to it, and then it happens, and you're like, yes. And you're excited and you're hyped and it's a fantastic night. And then one word, guys, Clayton, what's the one word? And you get there and you get it done, and then now it's kind of oh, it's over. Now we have to wait 4 months for anything to happen. But it was fun. It was a fun weekend, and we have some stuff to talk about.
We do.
A lot of stuff to talk about.
And make sure, as Clayton mentioned there, you smash that like button, and also you hit that subscribe button over there on the MHRT network. As you heard yesterday on the 5280 podcast, we are inching ever closer to 1,400 subscribers over there on the MHRT network. So continue to tell your friends, and continue to have your friends tell their friends about the Manely Broncos podcast, but more importantly, the MHRT network. It is a fantastic network that is filled with Denver sports content. We are certainly excited to get a chance to, again, talk about those Denver Broncos and the future possibly of what this could look like for the draft class. And also, speaking of the 5280 podcast last night, Big Mike, I know you mentioned that you are doing your final research paper while listening tonight. So much like last night, you will get a pass. You will get a pass that if you do fail, this research paper, it was just simply because, well, one, you were just enjoying your time listening to the Manely Broncos podcast, and that you also get a pass. So it's almost like you can slip your teacher a note that says, the reason why I failed was because I was listening to the Manely Broncos podcast and they told me that I get a pass.
Let me know how that works out for you if you do that. What's up, Graham? Actually, this is a good question. So before we get into it, let me just say right out of the bat. Obviously, Bo Nix is going to take up a lot of the conversation. I like this draft class. This is a fun draft class. This is a great draft class on paper. Obviously, none of them have played anything yet. It's kind of low hanging fruit because it wasn't actually a draft pick, but trading for that defensive lineman JFM from the Jets. I'm going to say he was our 5th round pick. We traded 5th round or 6th rounder for him. I don't even remember. John Franklin Myers was slam dunk, home run, whatever you want to call it. Just wow, that was surprising. And we were going into it. I was watching the draft. I was like, okay, we need defensive line help. We've needed defensive line help. I would have been okay if we took Byron Murphy at 12.
Yeah.
Honestly, would have loved it. I was going into round 2. I was like, find me a way to get Johnny Newton. Okay, just
he was
something.
sliding. He was sliding.
He was. And I don't know why I've seen so much mixed results on the Commanders draft class. Ended up getting him in the 2nd round. I thought they had a great class. Obviously, Jaden Daniels, I don't know, but JFM to me is my favorite. I know he's not a pick, but he was probably my favorite that I'm most excited about because he is good. I mean, this defensive line, low-key, kind of had a little bit of a turnaround, again, on paper, but you have John Franklin Myers now who's just so consistent. He's a great against the run. He gets after it against quarterbacks and is able to get to the quarterback and 2026 sixth. Yeah, just absolutely stupid. Just like it was literally a cap dump, and every Jets fan that you've seen react to that trade, they're just like, this is the dumbest thing of all time. And it makes sense why they did it after they traded for who were the other pass rusher they traded for? I'm totally forgetting the name. They basically just like traded for someone else.
Hassan Reddick.
It was. They didn't have the cap space. John Franklin Myers. That was a great.
Let's go more on the technicality of Graham's question.
On the technicality,
yeah.
Mine is Audric Estime.
Okay.
Which we'll get into. What was yours?
I feel like it's a flavor question. It's a favorite.
It is.
A favorite ice cream flavor question. Because I will admittedly say I'm going back and forth between three players, aside from obviously Bo Nix and everything. But it's Troy Franklin, it's Audric Estime, and it's the Jonah Ellis pick. Like those are the
Ellis.
Those are kind of the three that I'm kind of going.
Okay, but off technicality, it's only one, man.
I know. So I will probably roll with Troy Franklin. Actually, I will roll with Troy Franklin.
I like Troy Franklin. I love the pick. The pick makes sense to me. The player itself, not that I don't love Troy Franklin, the player. I have questions. But I don't have a problem with the pick, and I like the fit, and it makes perfect sense to me. The only thing that just I wonder about is he just seems very similar to Marvin Mims.
See,
we'll talk about it.
Yeah, no, I disagree. I don't see him as Marvin Mims at all.
Really? Why is that? See, because I've seen people say he's Sutton. Like, oh, well, now that we have Troy Franklin, we should trade Sutton, and I could not disagree with that more. The reason I see him more similar to like Marvin Mims is I think Marvin Mims is a better, route runner. But to me, Troy Franklin is like, he's the speed guy. He's the guy that's going to blow past the defense. He's a bit small is the issue. And he also is a bit weak. Just in terms of like play strength. Those are kind of his two biggest knocks, which is why he fell to the fourth round. I love the pick because you give your quarterback his number one wide receiver target from college. Like, it just makes perfect sense. You give him a guy, if you spend the second highest draft capital that this organization has ever spent on a quarterback by one spot, which the only other one that we ever drafted that high was Jay Cutler at 11, then go give him a guy that he already has chemistry with and that he trusts, instead of making him have to build up that chemistry with guys he's never played with, especially when you're going to have less practice time with the new CBA. You're going to have just less practice time in general between now and the start of the season. You only have 4 months. I mean, I know I just talked about we have to wait 4 months. I mean, that's not that long for him to get acquainted with this team.
But not them.
It's not for us. He has to learn the offense, which, I mean, he already kind of started doing. So anyway, I love the pick and I love the fit. It makes sense to me. I wonder about just like, how are you gonna fit that within the offense and the structure of the offense with what you're gonna do with Marvin Mims, which you've seemed to have portrayed or insinuated like, hey, he's going to have a bigger role, going to get in the ball more, which I agree with. I just think they are similar players, not the same player, but in terms of what they do and their size and just the speed, they're similar.
I look at it just from the simple fact of, I don't necessarily know. For one, why don't we just kind of lead things off with the Troy Franklin pick, since we're already kind of diving into it. But
we just kind of jumped in the fire.
Yeah. But I feel like
can't hold back.
When you look at from the Franklin idea, we already kind of, for one, we'll talk about it from the angle with the Jonah Ellis selection, right? But once they took Ellis, it became immediate, our reactions of, okay, it seems pretty obvious they lied to us about Drew Sanders, and that Drew Sanders is actually probably going to be rightfully staying at inside
Did they
linebacker.
lie, or did they just not know until they picked John Ellis?
Maybe, but again, like if you're kind of wordsmithing in a recent press conference, Peyton did say if, that if Drew Sanders goes to edge, meaning there was still a door open. There was still a door open that, he probably might actually stay at inside linebacker. Now they take Ellis, and you break down the room. It certainly seems that way. So anyway, I think as far as it's more about what they are going to show us. And so what I'm getting ready to say is that, like, as far as an offense, I feel like the more tools and the more chess pieces you can have at your disposal, the better your offense is going to be. I think the idea of Troy Franklin as a Z receiver, if you will, as a flanker wide receiver, one that you can necessarily use in motion, I think is a plus move for this offense. I think Marvin Mims.
But you're not going to use Marvin Mims like that?
No, I'm just saying that you can also use Marvin Mims in that way. But I think that there's a lot of different chess pieces now that you have Troy Franklin in the mix, and you have I should say, Marvin Mims. So I just think it's more about having more tools in your toolkit that you can use at your offensive disposal. Because again, like, let's think about it, right? The offense in general has always needed playmakers, right? Even with Courtland Sutton, still remaining there, they needed playmakers. And so you basically add so much of that, right? You add so much of those playmakers in the room. Like, it's a good problem to have. You definitely traded up for him. You invested in, Franklin. So I think that overall, the Broncos are just looking at this offense as a whole as like, we're going to make sure that we have a team that is, speed. It's just pure speed, and also some really solid possession wide receivers on your football team. Because, right, there was so much to be made about, you had Courtland Sutton in the room. Tim Patrick was brought back on a shortened contract. We talked about that before, right? And they went inside Josh Reynolds. So you have three big-bodied wide receivers, if you will, or decent sized wide receivers, right? Well, now you have Troy Franklin and Marvin Mims in that mix, who are really your elusive wide receivers. And I think that, like, that just makes it a little bit more cohesive. And then, mind you, this is going to end up being an offense that Sean Payton wants to run. And this is maybe another wrinkle of this. But, like, you add in the idea they never took a tight end. I'm not trying to personally go down that angle, but they didn't take a tight end, which would lend you to believe that they still want to develop a guy like a Greg Dulcich and possibly even a Lucas Kroll.
If he can stay healthy.
Right.
There's a big if.
But the idea is, like, this particular offense, that's what I was going to go with, is that particular offense that they probably have in mind this year is one that's probably going to end up being best suited for a guy like Greg Dulcich. Obviously, as I said yesterday on 5280, it would have been better to have him on the field for a guy like Russell Wilson, right, as a tight end last year to help stretch the field. But I think in a perfect offensive playbook world, it will suit him so much better being in the kind of offense Sean Payton would like to run going forward, and especially now with Bo Nix, in the mold there. So I think it's just more about having so many, players in your toolkit. Because I'm not trying to compare the Tyreek Hill and the McCole Hardman rookie year situation, but let's be completely honest. I'm not saying Marvin Mims is Tyreek Hill. I'm not even saying, Troy Franklin is even McCole Hardman. The fact is, people were questioning. They drafted McCole Hardman. Why did they draft McCole Hardman? You have Tyreek Hill, right? So I think that it's just
McCole Hardman didn't turn out that well. I'm not gonna lie. Like, he was okay.
Right. But I'm just saying, the fact is, they are just about adding the ultimate speed, I feel like, with those two in the room, which is something that team desperately lacked.
They did. Well, here's the thing about my questions with him and Marvin Mims. I like both players. Don't hear what I'm not saying. I'm not saying I don't like the Troy Franklin pick. I love Troy Franklin. I think he went way later than he should have, even with the size and strength concerns. Because, obviously he's going to be put on some strength in an NFL program. But just how are you going to – I just think you need to find a way to get Marvin Mims more snaps and more touches. And if you're going to put that speed guy in the Z wide receiver spot, who are you picking between the two of them? Because on the one hand, you have Troy Franklin, who already has the chemistry with Bo Nix, who, let's not kid ourselves, we'll talk about him. He's going to be your day one starter. If he's not, I'm going to be shocked.
On both fronts, maybe the Franklin and Nix, yeah.
Right. Well, I'm talking about Nix specifically. So if Nix is your starter, who would you rather have in that Z position? The guy that he knows and already has chemistry with, or a guy that he's thrown some passes to for a couple months in the offseason?
Right.
That's just my concern. Is I just think it limits what you're going to have the opportunity to use Marvin Mims for, which I think is a mistake because they need to find as many ways as possible to get Marvin Mims the ball. That's all I'm saying about it. Not that Troy Franklin can't be successful in that role. I think he can. I think he's a great wide receiver. Again, we've seen rookie wide receivers, especially ones that have speed like that, come into the NFL and be dominant right away. Not even dominant, just like have success right away. And I cannot overstate how important it is to give someone like Bo Nix, a guy that, again, he's already comfortable with, his number one go-to guy. I just think what are you going to use Marvin Mims for then? That's my only thing.
I think back to the only time
that get all three of them on the line, I guess, but go ahead.
I keep thinking about the time when really it feels like this is the first time. Excuse me. This really feels like the first time truly the Broncos have ever done this, because the only time I just, in terms of that's ringing a bell, in terms of them adding a wide receiver that a player is familiar with, I hate to bring up his name, but it was Paxton Lynch. In the Paxton Lynch year that they drafted him, they signed Mose Frazier as an undrafted free agent out of Memphis. And that was just a different twist of it. They brought in an undrafted free agent versus, actual drafting a guy. And I think that,
and Troy Franklin is obviously a better prospect.
That's not what I'm going with. But I just think it just very rarely happened.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think that the fact that you have the opportunity to give it to Sean Payton and a player, frankly, I think there are a few misconceptions a little bit with Troy Franklin. I think if you're talking maybe his biggest knock from me personally, he needs to add a little bit of weight. He's sitting at about 175. If he can,
just size and strength. It's a big issue.
If he can add a bit, maybe 15 pounds, I feel like that would be ideal for him. And so I think the other part of it is for him, I think maybe he could do a little bit more in the route tree, but I think his route tree is actually a misconception to also a degree too. I think he has far more at his disposal with what he has there, and I also think his yak is a bit underrated with what he has, because I think given his opportunity and with his speed, you have the opportunity to do some crossers right in this particular offense with Sean Payton, with guys like Marvin Mims and a Troy Franklin, and you get them in space. It really gets you excited as far as seeing them in space and run for days with those types of players. So I'm very curious. And then the last thing I wanted to end this was not necessarily a Troy Franklin thing. I know a lot has been made about Courtland Sutton, but and in terms of stuff being, come forward and him still remaining as a Denver Bronco, I personally feel like it still bears watching. It still bears watching what is going to be happening with Courtland Sutton. As I said earlier,
we still trade him after the draft?
I don't know. I don't know. I just think it continues to be, to bear watching. But they do have a better room. It is a better room, given what they currently have, right? And we said that earlier. I just kind of come back to the conversation now with Reynolds and Patrick and, Sutton, in the sense that I'm kind of curious to see how that entire room is going to end up being shaken out in terms of the wide receiver room. And I think the one thing you can definitively say, Brandon, is it is a far more deeper room than it has been in many, many years past. And I'm very much looking forward to it. in terms of what they're going to be able to do. So I think the times of you listing, the Broncos, set 5 wide receivers, right, is that you'll have a set of 5 wide receivers, but you're going to be looking at it from the standpoint of, are they going to be actually carrying 6 instead of 5?
I just think you have to do whatever you possibly can to keep going something at this point. That's just my personal take on it. Mostly because, again, if you want to put Bo Nix in the best possible position to succeed. If you want to put his guy, Troy Franklin, in the best possible position to succeed, Troy Franklin is the perfect wide receiver to be the perfect type of wide receiver to be your number 2. I don't think you can ever rely on him to be your number 1 guy in the NFL just because of, again, he's smaller. He's very, very fast. Obviously, he can expand his route tree more. Not that it was necessarily bad. I think he can run some routes. It's not just he only ran the go, but I just think he can't block well. Obviously, he's just probably too small. I just don't think you can really rely on him to be that physical number 1 guy that can go out there and win the ball, win against coverage physically to get the ball, bring the ball down in those 50-50 situations. If you have a guy that can do that, Troy Franklin is a perfect complement to that, and I think so is Marvin Mims. But I think you got to keep Courtland Sutton to give you that package. And Josh Reynolds, I think Josh Reynolds has been a very underrated wide receiver, and I like him a lot. I think he's just he's very consistent. To me, Josh Reynolds is almost more of a, I hate to say it, I know we say Tim Patrick and Courtland Sutton are similar. Josh Reynolds to me is kind of almost the Tim Patrick replacement.
See, I don't know.
And I say replacement lightly. I'm not saying we're going to trade Tim Patrick or cut him. I just think he's coming off of that injury, and this is what his last year under contract. I don't know, but
my thing is
interesting.
Obviously, we say so often we're doing it in mock drafts, right? You throw a dart in the 7th round. It kind of is what it is, right? In the 7th round, you're kind of throwing a dart. You don't want to really spend too much, overanalyzing it in terms of with it being a 7th round pick, right? But the Vele pick, right? The Vele pick in the 7th round, obviously coming from Utah, he's also 26 years old, coming in because he had the mission, right? He had his mission, and so that's why he's coming in a little bit older. But he does, to a degree, feel like a very Tim Patrick type of player, Tim Patrick type of wide receiver. So where does he kind of fall in line with this? It's going to be very interesting. But if you're strictly looking at some of those players that you're really looking at and really putting it in the vein of the wide receiver room, Jalen Virgil is recovering from his injury, but Brandon Johnson and Virgil, man, those are 2 guys that what really is going to happen with those guys? Because now, as we said, you have Sutton, Patrick, Reynolds, Franklin, Mims. Then you have Vele. And granted, they could easily cut Vele too.
I think he might be a practice squad guy.
Right. But yeah, you have Virgil and Brandon Johnson. So it's just you have some decisions to make, certainly, with that wide receiver room. Now, a other selection. We'll go to your favorite selection. Enough of talking about some Franklin. Let's go to your favorite selection, or one of my other favorite selections also too, Brandon. You want to talk about maybe someone who probably put a player on notice, and maybe it's the same player that you have versus I have, but
I think he was already on notice. I'm not going to lie.
But Audric Estime.
I talked about Estime at one point a while back. I don't remember exactly what episode, but I remember talking about him. I'm sorry, Javonte. I love you, but there's Audric Estime is replacing someone. Audric Estime is going to come in there and he's going to compete from day one, and he's going to make an impact from day one. And honestly, he could come in and be your number 1 power back. Maybe not day one, but I think Audric Estime could be he could be your running back one. Like he could be your main go-to bell cow guy. I mean, this dude is an absolute unit. If you guys somehow have not seen that picture of Audric Estime that's like
my goodness,
going around everywhere. I mean, there's more than just that one picture, but there's a picture of him like basically like flexing and roaring into the camera in like standing in, I think it was in like the tunnel or something at Notre Dame.
Yeah.
And dude is massive, just freak human being. He's only 20 years old.
Yeah.
You go watch him play, like you kind of think of, so here's the thing. He does remind me obviously of Javonte. You got the bruising guy that doesn't go down, the super power back. What was the thing that we kind of heard and saw with the weakness of Javonte was like the vision, was like he kind of would just like make that one cut, or he would sometimes like run into his own guy. Audric Estime has very good vision for a guy his size. And also he didn't test well, but if you watch him play, he plays faster than he tested.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of interesting. Like there's always those guys, like you put the pads on them and they somehow like just play differently and go and like run differently than they do when they're just like running in shorts. And Audric Estime is one of those dudes. He had 18 touchdowns last year. Like I don't know. I like him. I think he's really good. I think he can come in and kind of be that, again, that guy for you, that bell cow. I don't know if he's going to be as much of a weapon in the passing game, which obviously we've seen Sean Payton like to do, but I don't know. We'll see. I think just Javonte coming off of those substantial knee injuries we heard Mike Kliss talk about, they got to add a running back. Something's going to happen there. Like Audric Estime might be that dude, and maybe this is a Samaje Perine replacement. Again, Samaje Perine. We seem to have a type between Audric Estime, Samaje Perine, and Javonte Williams. Someone. Okay, I don't know if you saw this. I don't remember even who did it. Someone was basically going through, this was before we even drafted, and this was like going up to the draft. Someone was basically going through and doing pro comparisons of every draft eligible running back in the class. And pretty much every player was like, it was comped to obviously some kind of former pro player or current pro player. Like, hey, this guy runs like this player. And you get to Audric Estime, and Audric Estime's comparison is if an oxen had a baby with a wrecking ball. It's the only one that wasn't compared to an actual NFL running back. It was if an oxen had a baby with a wrecking ball. And that whole room, we might have the most thick with 4 C's running back room in the NFL between Samaje, Audric, and Javonte. And Samaje Perine's only 28. I mean, it feels like he's been in the league for like 30 years. But he's not that old. The only thing is, like, again, the reason I say Estime might be a slight replacement for him is, I mean, this is his last year of his contract with Samaje, but we've seen Samaje be the guy that can catch the passes. So I don't know. It'll be interesting. But I think Audric Estime is going to come in here and he's going to be, at the very least, he's going to be pushing Javonte pretty hard, and he's going to make an impact day one. I don't know if he's going to be our RB1 day one. Maybe they split the backfield. Maybe it's a 3-headed monster, which I have mixed feelings about. But Audric Estime is going to do some stuff.
Yeah, I see. For me, I lend it to this feels like a Samaje Perine replacement.
Yeah. Oh, it probably is. But I mean, yeah, go ahead.
But I think that we should preface it by saying the Broncos needed to add a running back anyway to this room because
we did.
Because Javonte and Perine are entering the last end of their deals.
Oh, that's true. It is the last year for Javonte as well. Well, that and the knee injury. Like, it sucks for Javonte.
Yeah.
But this is why I'm so anti-pay a running back free agency, and I'm so anti-draft running back round one, because you can just draft running back every year and find guys.
I know. And it's just, it was for me, it was just for me, it was like, I just could not see the Broncos passing, especially Sean Payton and George Payton, passing on the idea of taking a running back no later than round 5, right? And that's when Estime should have been drafted a lot higher than round 5. But Estime, man, he is
I think some people just think he's slow.
You know what? I'm not comparing it, but comparing the situation. And again, they always tell you scout the player, not the helmet. But it's kind of hard not to look at the helmet and not think of this particular player, and given the whole situation that he went through. Remember Kyron Williams? Kyron Williams from Notre Dame had a bad combine. And then he goes to a great situation with the Los Angeles Rams.
Great situation until they drafted.
He goes to Los Angeles. Anyway. He goes to the Rams, but he flourishes. Like, he absolutely flourishes with the Los Angeles Rams. Estime, to a same degree, has a pretty bad, combine, but it feels like he's going to a really good situation. And also, I wouldn't put it past the Broncos, or I should say Sean Payton, of keeping 4 backs. Like, there was one point where he kept 4 backs on a roster, if I'm not mistaken. Like, I think it was Mark Ingram, Pure Thomas.
Well, okay. Yeah.
So, I mean, I wouldn't put it past him. But I think, and we'll talk about this other guy as a name here a little bit later, but there is some legitimate competition in that room now, aside from just Estime. And so we'll talk about him, but I feel like,
you mean the guy I talked about on a Sleeper episode, the former wide receiver?
Yep.
Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. But it's funny you bring up Mark Ingram, because Audric Estime is Sean Payton's Mark Ingram here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, he is
in so many ways.
Like he really feels like a player that, I mean, I would love to see, and kudos to Biggie Bronco. I believe he said this in the chat yesterday on 5280, but I love the idea. I would love to see a package with Estime, P. Ryan, and Javonte on the field at the exact same time for like a goal line package. Could you imagine like the way Gage described it is like a diamond formation with all 3 of those backs, and you have no idea which way it's going to go, but that one of them is absolutely going to be punishing you at the goal line. Like,
unless Bo Nix runs it in.
Unless Bo Nix runs it in. But it's going to be bully ball. Like, it is 100% going to be bully ball with Estime and Ryan at the helm there.
Oh, I think we definitely carry probably 4 running backs, honestly, because again, what's the easiest, best option or best situation to put your rookie quarterback in, who's probably going to start day 1?
Is a running game.
Help him in every way you can. Help him with weapons, give him weapons he knows. We already talked about Troy Franklin. Give him a running game. We have guys that won't go down now. You have guys, you get somewhere close to the goal line. Bo Nix is good in the red zone, but you get close to the goal line and it's just like that ball is getting in the end zone somehow. Like, you can give it to your bulldozer and he'll just run it in. So that's going to be fun. Like, Audric Estime might have 10 touchdowns as a rookie. I'm not going to lie. I mean, he could turn into, again, as much as I love Javonte, Audric Estime could turn into that goal line back. So could Samaje. We have 3 guys that could be your goal line back. I don't even know which one you're going to use, but Audric Estime I could see being that guy. I mean, he's just younger, more explosive, doesn't have as much wear and tear on him as someone like Samaje does, doesn't have the injury history and concern that Javonte does. I mean, my only concern is, not really concern, but the only thing that's like actively working against this prediction for me is because Samaje and Javonte are kind of on their last years of their deal. I mean, I would be surprised if you just see them get so many touches and we keep Estime a bit more fresh, and he's kind of like the future because he's only 20. But I just think he's going to be way more explosive. Like, go if you want to have fun, go back and watch just plays of Audric Estime at Notre Dame, because again, you'll see what I mean when it's just like he just looks like a snowball rolling down a hill. It just continues to get faster and no one can stop it. Like, he's so much faster than you would think when you watch him play in pads, especially if you compare it to his testing numbers. Like, he just runs by people. It's favorite pick. Well,
and I think that there's also a misconception to him and with Estime that he is actually a little bit more athletic than people give him credit for. Like, he actually, there are quite a few runs. If you go back and look at his film, over there on YouTube, I'm not saying you should divert from the Manly Broncos and watch them estimate film. I mean, that's your call.
You can open a new tab, check it out, then come back. You can leave us open. You can hear us speak.
Right. But there are a few runs that he makes every once in a while in games where he's fleet of foot, man. Like, he is pretty athletic for a guy that is like 227 pounds. And I think some of that is his youth, right? But he's plenty athletic for a guy that size. Like, the way he even does jump cuts every now and then, as far as some of his cuts, is pretty impressive in the change of direction. Some of the statistics that I was able to call up that I thought was very, very fascinating was, you're talking about a guy who very rarely fumbles in his career. I think the total amount of fumbles that he's had is, well, he only fumbled once in 2023, like once. So
I think he fumbled more. Yeah, he did. He had more of that issue as a freshman. So it's nice to see that he kind of was able to fix that.
Yeah. But then going forward, he had yards after contact. This is going to what we were talking about earlier, though. He ranked 7th nationally in yards after contact, 892 yards after contact in 2023. He was 5th. He was 5th in carries over 15 or more yards in 2023. He had 23 carries of 15 yards or more, and that ranked him in. And that ranked him in the top 5. It's just an absurd. He's got some really good production to him, and you add him to a room. I think it's going to make that room very, very, very fascinating to certainly operate. We'll talk about the other pick that I feel like, a little bit later, that I feel like is another competition for a certain player in the room that I don't think Broncos country has want to have that conversation yet, but I think that it's competition for that particular player in the room. We'll talk about him a little bit later.
And depending on how you ranked your running backs, I've seen plenty of people say Jonathan Brooks from Texas was the best back in the class. And one of the things you continuously saw about him was, like, again, he's just hard to tackle. He is the most missed tackles in the college football last year. He only had one more than Audric Estime.
Who did?
Jonathan Brooks, who, according to, depending on who you listen to, he was either a lot of people's running back 1 or running back 2 in this class, and that was a big part of his game. Is like, he just forces missed tackles, and I mean, he's a good back. Don't get me wrong, but he only had one more than our boy Audric Estime. So, anyway, but that'll be fun. It'll be interesting to see what happens there. And I mean, Javonte is a year removed from that injury. Maybe we see the old Javonte. This might be just like an absolute beast of a running team. We might have 20 plus rushing touchdowns.
It's going to be fun. And we'll talk about the other person in the room that is quite fascinating. Do we want to talk about it now, as long as we talk about running backs, or we want to wait? No, we may as well just hold off on that. Let's go to the other draft pick. Let's go backwards. We didn't get a chance to talk about it. We briefly mentioned his name, but Jonah Elliss. He is the son of former Bronco Luther Elliss. So maybe not exactly the homecoming that maybe Bronco fans were wanting in terms of Luke McCaffrey, but they were able to get Luther Elliss, here, and he's a fun player. He's a relentless motor, and actually, what's fun here is to a certain degree, like what we talk about with Marvin Mims and Troy Franklin, of what you described, which is them possibly being the same. You now have what feels like, and to what people have been describing Elliss as, 2 Hassan Reddick types, with Nick Bonito and Jonah Ellis, because Ellis was a player that was playing linebacker at one point in time before going to edge rusher. So I'm really curious to see what that's going to be doing. But they added another body to the room, a relentless motor, and a player that, if I'm not mistaken, at one point in time during the season with Utah was a very, very productive sack artist, for the Utah Utes.
Yeah, Jonah Ellis is, as much as we continue to seem to get these like kind of slightly undersized pass rush specialists who come in, and that's kind of like their role. They're the designated pass rusher. They're like the rotational pass rusher. I mean, Jonah Ellis kind of fits that mold, but Jonah Ellis is very refined as a pass rusher coming in as a rookie, which you don't really see. He just has so many moves that he will hit you with when he's rushing the passer that you don't really see players have as much as a rookie. I mean, like, not that it doesn't happen, but usually a lot of times at the college level, especially when you see those like productive pass rushers, it's very much like it's very athletically based. It's like, well, I'm just going to beat you because I'm faster than you, or I'm going to beat you because I'm stronger than you. And at the NFL level, that doesn't really, you don't have that much of a luxury because everyone is stronger and everyone is faster. So you need to have a way to, like, a strategy to get around the guy and win your rep against the tackle or whoever's guarding you, trying to block you. And Luther Ellis, father of Jonah Ellis, actually is also their coach at Utah. I don't know exactly what position he coaches. I don't know if he's a position coach or like a defensive, just like a defensive assistant coach, but he obviously taught Jonah what he knows, because Jonah is able to go in there and string those together and actually have a plan and use like a jab move or a ghost move in his pass rushing repertoire, and not just be like, oh, I'm going to beat you because I'm faster than you, which could let you see more production from him quicker as a rookie, because he's not going to have that as much of that learning curve where he's only relying on speed and everyone's faster and he can't get it. I think Jonah Ellis is going to be, we're going to have a better pass rush. Like, that's all I know is that was one of our biggest weaknesses between John Franklin Myers. We're going to have a better pass rush. And you know what? We're also going to stop the run better on that defensive line. And I feel like we've talked about how much that was a need. And I feel like it was really easy to look at this and say, oh, well, we didn't really do a ton there. Like, there weren't really many flashy moves, but you go back and look at the end result, and I'm kind of happy with it. I mean, obviously we talked about Jonah Ellis, who we drafted. We talked about the John Franklin Myers trade. We also signed Malcolm Roach from the Saints, who is one of the best defensive linemen against the run. And so we're against the run as well, which we couldn't stop.
Yeah, that was good. And Angelo Blackson, like we signed him too. As far as depth, so they really did a number on that defensive line. Obviously we saw with the whole jersey release, Purcell basically, say, hey, I would love to certainly come back and be a Bronco and wear those throwback uniforms. Maybe they do bring him back. I will say, if they bring him back, you're talking about a much more sturdier unit, if it isn't already, defensive line. So I love the idea of adding some more bodies to that. But like, so get this with almost said Luther Ellis. Get this with Jonah Ellis here. So he didn't really have that big of a year with Utah in 2021, but he really broke out in terms of hurries in 2022, and then 2023 obviously is when he really broke out. He had 21 hurries in 2022, followed up by 24 in 2023, 13 sacks in 2023 with 4 only in 2022. So the hurries that he was making in 2023, he was actually succeeding in. And I'll tell you this part was impressive. I don't know if anybody's actually had the chance to actually look down and look at his game log, Ellis's game log from 2023. we talk so much about how there are game wreckers or game stretches where there's like people that have just wrecked games for a consistent stretch. Get this, and obviously I know it's the Pac-12, but look, starting from the UCLA game, and this is an absurd stat line. He had 7 hurries, 3 sacks, and 10 total tackles. From that game on, he had 4 hurries, 2 sacks, 6 total tackles. And then in the next game, he had 3 hurries, 2 sacks, 5 total tackles, then 2 sacks and 4 total tackles. So in a stretch of from like week 4 to week 8, he accumulated 10 sacks from that week alone to accumulate his 13 sacks on the year. Like, that is an absurd stretch. If you want to talk about how he really made a name for himself as a draft prospect, you really don't need to look no further than that particular stretch right there.
We should just bring all the Ellis brothers in. 3 of his brothers are playing in the NFL. I mean, only one of them is a free agent, but
it was the Eagles actually currently cut Noah.
Yeah, they cut Noah.
Yeah.
He is it's in his blood, man. It's in his blood. Now I'm excited to see it. I mean, even though again he's kind of another one of those slightly undersized guys that he needs better against the run, but we sorely lacked a slightly consistent pass rush for the past several years, it feels like, and we're going to get after him. All I know is we're going to get after him this year, even if we don't have as much versatility across the defensive line at once. Like maybe you have, again, you're going to have guys that you bring in on obvious passing downs, and you can't keep them in there every play because they're a bit more of a liability against the run. We're going to get after the quarterback. Like we're going to hit guys.
Yeah, we absolutely are. Going now, you can maybe take this. We'll go down the drain on this one to our next pick.
Oh boy, wow. No, I mean, you teed it up. You get to take the pun and go all the way.
Okay.
No, just kidding. I do like Chris Abrams. I really haven't watched him much. Like I know very little about him. From what I hear, that was a steal from where we drafted him. But I'm gonna be honest, I don't know a ton about him. I know more about Rakestraw, his college teammate who ended up going to the Lions. Dan, the Lions just actually lucked out with cornerbacks in this draft. Like they killed it. But Chris Abrams-Drain, from everything that I've heard, like from where we drafted him, good pickup. You can't have too many corners. I want to look more up about him. Like I want to watch him more. But yeah, coming from Missouri seems like a solid corner, especially because you look at, obviously we don't really have like a specific dedicated, this is our cornerback 2 right now. Obviously, PS2 is kind of like the go-to.
We think it's Riley, but we don't.
I think it's Riley, but that's what I was going to say is Riley Moss. Like he was drafted, I think, with that purpose, but you really haven't seen him do much. So, like,
it's TBD. It's still wait and see. I know. Yeah.
Was Chris Abrams-Drain brought in to try to compete with him there? I don't know.
And they also went through with it, and they also were able to get pen to paper with Levi Wallace.
Yeah, they did bring Levi Wallace in, which I actually forgot about. The other thing that I do know about Chris Abrams-Drain, again, he's sort of, to stick with the slightly undersized. He's slightly undersized. He might be more of an inside corner, and we already have some good slot corners on this roster. But again, you can't have too much depth at cornerback, and seems to be a solid guy who could get some snaps for you on the inside in the slot. Maybe what we're trying to do is, instead of like specifically getting a guy who's like, you're a safety, you're Justin Simmons replacement, or maybe what we're trying to do is like go with more 6 defensive backs, like versatility, and not really have like a defined safety, but just a bunch of chess pieces.
And I think that that's why
which is what Riley Moss could be for, because he's super athletic.
Well, I think that that's the idea for the team as a whole, right? We preface that with the offense, right? With Franklin and Mims and, some of these other wide receivers as far as chess pieces, right? Estime falling into that category as well. So I think that maybe it's just an overall theme, for this team, along with Vance, Jim Leonard, and then on that offensive side of the ball. I found this interesting though. So obviously Jim Leonard was hired. I felt like I'll pat myself on the back for this one, but I felt like, the Jim Leonard hire was going to at one point become underrated because everybody's going to end up talking about some of these other moves like, in the draft or free agency. And people at times may actually forget about the fact that Jim Leonard, was hired as defensive backs coach or secondaries coach, right? Well, I did some digging and I looked at the 2022 Wisconsin defensive back room when Leonard was there. And he definitely has the type. He definitely has a body type in terms of corners that he is interested in. And interestingly enough, that room, if you go back and pull up the 2022 Wisconsin roster, a fair amount of them were 5'10", 5'11", and roughly 180 pounds. So Chris Abrams-Draine fits that mold of corner that Leonard is looking for, and probably a twitchy corner, right? That is something that if you go back and even read about Jim Leonard, he is a huge fan of very athletic and aggressive defenses. So having that kind of athletic profile and a very, very strong tackler. That is one thing you can say about Draine, is he is a very impressive tackler. He's aggressive. And so I think that in terms of when you put that personality together, it does scream like the possibility that you probably want to put him more inside than outside. And maybe he's going to be your dime backer.
Yeah.
Like he's going to be your dime back, corner. But I will say, and one more time again, I do feel a little bit more comfortable now with that secondary room with Chris Abrams-Draine. And you hate to say it because, you want to make sure that these players, play a little bit better in year 3, but you got to wonder about Damari Mathis with this pick, because this is a kind of selection that you wonder what's the future going to be holding for a guy like a Damari Mathis.
Yeah.
So I'm super excited about it.
Damari Mathis might not. Does Damari Mathis make this roster?
I don't know. I don't think so.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah.
But the only thing that I was going to say about Draine, so he is a great tackler. My only concern there is the same thing. Like, he's smaller. I feel like him tackling guys in college versus him trying to tackle guys in the NFL is going to be more difficult for him. And he might be better suited, more inside or coming down to support in the run, or like go against some smaller guys, like him going against a tight end. I'm scared. But you have a guy that obviously McMillan's stud slot corner. We don't really have a ton behind him in terms of like, this is our dedicated slot guy, and Chris Abrams-Draine could be someone that we see taking that role in this defense in terms of like on the interior in the slot. So that'd be interesting.
He had a missed tackle percentage in his career of 7.7, which is incredible. His missed tackles overall were 4, 3, and 4. 4 in 2023, 3 in 2022, and 4 in 2021. He really doesn't miss many tackles. So, I mean, that's one thing you can legitimately say is, I mean, yeah, he was undersigned. And you do make a really good point with it going to the NFL, because not only is it a fast game, but it's a much bigger, stronger game, of course, too, in the NFL. And so
from what I know about Draine, again, I want to watch him more. Here's like you say, tackling is kind of his biggest thing. In my opinion, like Chris Abrams-Draine's biggest pro in the pro column is dude knows how to make plays on the ball. He started as a wide receiver.
Yeah.
He kind of shows that in his ability to just like locate the ball and go after it. That when you get a wide receiver that converts to a corner, like he knows how to cover against the ball and against wide receivers and go after it and run the route for them and intercept it, because he's done it. Like that's his game. So I think even if he struggles in the NFL until he gets bigger to make as many solid tackles and maybe he misses more, I do see him being more of kind of that ball hawk that I really miss in Justin Simmons, because Justin Simmons was kind of that guy for us, and obviously PS2. But other than that, McMillan kind of turned into that dude as well. Actually, especially a couple years ago in the Chargers game. But yeah, I think Abrams Drain and his former ability as a wide receiver shows up in him being a corner.
Yeah. Moving on to, we mentioned about Vele a little bit. Let's go to the center that they drafted from South Carolina. This is what you wish we had Matty here. Yeah.
I can't. Gorgonzola. Oh my God. Yeah. I know nothing about this player other than the fact that he has a glorious mustache and mullet that he shaved off, is what I was about to say. And I'm automatically dropping him down in my rankings because of that. If he had kept it, immediate starter.
Yeah, it was.
Just kidding. You can't have too much depth at safety or at center. What the hell did I say? Safety at center.
If he's playing for what? If he's playing safety,
Nick Gargiulo is playing safety.
If he's playing safety, we may need to phone call Jim Leonard, and that's why.
I was thinking about the fact that Justin Simmons is still a free agent, and I don't understand why. At center, you kind of can't have too much depth there on this team, because, I mean, right now, like if you had to say right now who our starting center is, I mean, obviously it's Alex Forsyth, right?
If I'm going to use Forsyth, I think it's Alex Forsyth.
Yeah. I don't know. I like Alex Forsyth. Obviously, he has that Oregon connection, but I think Luke Wattenberg they like. Maybe they see Luke Wattenberg. He kind of kicks out to guard a bit too. Sam Mustapher they brought in, and Nick also played some guard. So I think it's just very much a lot of depth on the interior, which again I don't think is a bad thing. Safety. Why do I keep saying safety? Corner, interior offensive line. Positions you can't have too much depth at. And we just seem to want the Oregon guys as well, because I forgot that we also brought in Calvin Throckmorton, who played at Oregon, and also signed with the Saints. So obvious connection there. But I actually kind of liked him coming out of Oregon a few years ago as a kind of swing tackle. It looks like he went more inside. But I don't think you can have too much depth on the offensive line and in general, and especially the interior of that offensive line. The only place now where we're lacking that depth, unfortunately, more is the tackle, but spots. But every team in the NFL basically can say that.
Absolutely. I actually look at it more from, this is actually kind of putting maybe Wattenberg on notice, because he can play multiple different spots, which is something, Wattenberg can, but he's a guard and a center. Garuglio can play center, guard, and tackle.
Garuglio, is that it?
I have no idea. I made it up as I went.
Gargiulo. Isn't he Italian? He's Italian, right?
He's Italian for sure.
Bring back the mustache, bring back the mullet. You're a Hall of Famer. If you're listening, Nick. You're
an immediate Broncos Ring of Famer. But yeah, I'm definitely curious about the move. The last 7th round pick that they did take, there was a center, was Alex Forsyth. And that brings us to, it's a nice way of kind of tying a bow on all of this. That leads us to the Bo Nix conversation. For one,
let's get bodacious.
I'm a Bo lever, right? I'm a
take the mic away from Cam.
But
I've been waiting for this. Let's get into it.
Yeah. So I think that the way that we could preface this is, for the Alex Forsyth conversation, you're not advising a 7th round draft pick on what you're possibly getting with Bo Nix, which is something that they did. They did talk to Forsyth about Bo, his traits, his tendencies, everything like that. They talked to Forsyth about that. You're not doing that if you don't necessarily believe if he's going to be your starter, which they firmly believe. I would imagine that he's going to end up being your starter. And it's a very likely outcome that he's going to end up being your starter at center, especially week one, especially with it trending to the idea that it's going to end up being Bo Nix starting week one. Okay. Let me preface this by, why don't since you're a little bit on the fence with it, why don't you kind of lead it off first, and then I'll
let me set myself up here real quick. There you go. Okay. I'm not on the fence with the pick. I like Bo Nix, the player. I'm just on the fence, but not on the fence. It's already happened. I'm rooting for him. I'm a Bo Nix fan. I like it. Let's fucking Bo. All right.
Yeah.
But my only thing is just like, at 12, really? You take him at 12? Come on. And I understand the Atlanta Falcons threw a wrench in this in every way possible. And if he's your guy, he's your guy. You take your guy at 12. That was my only initial just gut reaction to it. But you know what? I'm going to move past it. I'm going to say my piece. I said my piece. I'm going to move on. Let's go. We have a rookie quarterback finally in Denver that we drafted that we seem to believe in. I'm ready for some excitement here. I'm tired of being negative. Bo Nix is a fantastic human being. He seems to be a smart player. Sean Payton believes in him. And
Bo believes in him.
I'm going to kill you because I can't handle this for the rest of the next. If Bo Nix works out, you better hide because I'm tired. I'm going to be tired of listening to you do that for the next 8 years. But I think Bo, here's the thing. To a point, I think we have maybe not drastically, I think we are too in love with physical traits. Because the thing that I continue to see people say about Bo Nix is that he has a weak arm or he has an average arm. And it's all about arm strength, arm talent, which are two different things. Like, it's so annoying to me that you think that just because some guy is, you know what that reminds me of? Tall guy, you want a tall guy with a strong arm? You're John Elway. If anything, did you learn nothing from the Paxton Lynch era? Arm strength means nothing. I don't care if you can throw it 1,000 miles an hour. If you can't throw it where you need it to be, that's why Milton was a 7th round draft pick. If he can hit the barn, he's going to throw the ball through the barn, but he's probably not going to be able to hit the barn. I just think it's so overrated. I'm not saying it's not important, but I think if you give me the choice of would I rather have a guy that has a howitzer, but struggles to read the field and struggles to go through his progressions and struggles to put the ball where it needs to be, and a guy that is smart with the football, can do what the play is designed to do and get the ball where it needs to be and is accurate with the ball, give me the guy that's smart. If you want the guy that has the traits, you know who else had the traits? Drew Lock. You know who else had the traits? Paxton Lynch. You know who else had the traits? Jamarcus Russell. You draft for traits, and sometimes it works out. Sometimes you get Patrick Mahomes. Sometimes you get Josh Allen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. It's possible, and the results are astounding. But give me the guy that's smarter every day of the week. You know who else? I mean, obviously, Peyton Manning, all-time great. All-time great. And I'm not saying Peyton Manning had a weak arm by any means necessary, by any means. And I'm not saying that Bo Nix is Peyton Manning, because I think Peyton Manning, as a analytical processor, I don't know if you ever see another player that was as smart as Peyton Manning pre-snap or with the ball, just in general. Like, Peyton Manning was literally, his thing was he's your offensive coordinator that's on the field. Like, that's how smart Peyton Manning was. Absolutely insane. But you want to talk about a guy that wins with his mind and doesn't necessarily have to win with his arm? Give me Peyton Manning. Bo Nix is a smart player. I'm not going to say he's in that vein. I'm not going to say he's Peyton Manning, but he's a smart player. He takes care of the football. He has some insane throws on tape that's just like, the touch that's required to make some of these throws, to just layer the ball in there and just like put it right where it needs to be, throw it past the defender's ear. It's kind of insane, and it's fun to watch. And you know what? I'm a Bo fan. You listen to him at the podium. The dude is a great, genuine human being. And we talked about this before we went on air. And this is somewhat unrelated, but just to put it out there because we saw that happen today and it's a topic of conversation. Shedeur Sanders, I love you, man. But I don't know if you get it. I'm going to be honest. Like, throwing your teammate under the bus like that and saying he's bad, I don't even remember him. Like, Shedeur, to me, I don't even know if it's his fault. I think obviously a lot of it is the fame of the program now with Dion coming in and that whole thing. And I like Colorado. I think it's a fun team to watch. I just think they're very in their heads about all of this. And they're very arrogant. And I'd rather have someone like Bo now, who is a coachable kid, who is smart. I has a struggle saying kid because he's 24, but he's smart and he has a lot of experience and you can put him out there. Or if you tell me it's that, or like, yeah, we could get Shedeur next year. The locker room presence of your quarterback and leadership ability is not something to scoff at.
No, it is 100% not something that you want to scoff at. In fact, go replay a lot of the interviews and everything from Sean Payton, or maybe just the press conference of him talking about Bo Nix, and tell yourself, maybe they did not want to pass on the idea of actually taking a quarterback this year. If I would guarantee that I don't think that Sean Payton loved the idea of passing on a quarterback this year. He wanted to make sure he got his quarterback this year. And I think that the Atlanta Falcons doing what they did, I said it before, I think it gave Sean that Mahomes PTSD. And like, and anybody, that doesn't remember that, like it's been said numerous times, like, I think if you look at it from the standpoint of, like, Sean really wanted Patrick Mahomes. There really wasn't anything he could have done about it because it was in silence. No one really knew that the Kansas City Chiefs were going to end up taking, Patrick Mahomes, or even the New Orleans Saints to a degree. But like, no one knew this. The Chiefs were going to jump in and swoop in and take the pick above the Saints and actually select Patrick Mahomes. And so I think that once that happened, it's just it left it has that scar tissue for Sean, and just in the back of his mind. And I think that, for him, the moment that the Penix move happened, I really believe that, Sean made the right call in taking him. And again, like, you alluded to it, you hear him talk about him. Like, go even call up the Pat McAfee interview with Bill Belichick and McAfee. He literally rattles off almost every single category that Bo Nix is number one in, right? In fact, a friend of the program, friend of the podcast, Ben Cummins, at Ben Cummins FF, tweeted this actually earlier this morning about Bo Nix's rankings in Pro Football Focus. Passing grades, first. Intermediate grade, first. Pressure grade, first. Adjusted completion percentage, first. We even got balloons out of that. Turnover worthy percentage, first. Deep passing grade, tied for fifth. No pressure grade, eighth. He is a very, very efficient quarterback. His ball handling in the pocket is probably my favorite underrated trait about him, to where if you are going to make some comparisons to Drew Brees, that's one where I would actually say they do actually compare a little bit favorably there, which is his ball handling in the pocket, because he does these like pump fakes, right? He does sometimes like these pump fakes into the pocket. Actually, Brock Purdy does these every once in a while. Like he'll do like the pump fakes in the pocket to at least create some space. There's a play that ends up getting broken down where a free rusher is actually coming toward him. He tries to pump fake. The defender jumps into the air and he alludes to his left and hits the wide open receiver on his left-hand side to at least create some more positive yards. He is a playmaker in the pocket in just different forms than some of those other guys like Caleb and Penix to a degree, and of course JJ and Drake May and others. Like he just has the playmaking style to himself that you give everything to his toolkit, and you allow him to be that pre-snap quarterback that at times we did see at Oregon. Like, he just screams that Sean Payton pick. I mean, Chris Sims talked about it. RG3 talked about it. Joe Klatt talked about it. It was pretty obvious that, even the prognosticators loved the idea of Nix in a Denver Broncos uniform. He's here. I think as things started trending that way, from my vantage point, Brandon, it seemed like the Bo Nix pick for the Broncos was trending, funny enough, to the Garrett Bowles type of selection in 2017, where you just
I don't know if it was that far,
but to where it was the sneaky suspicion that, it was going to be Bo Nix. The question wasn't so much they will take him at 12. The question is just where. And I think, again, like once the Atlanta Falcons came in and, fooled everybody and took him at 8, it just kind of opened the floodgates, and the Broncos were like, let's just not mess around. Let's take him at 12. And of course, after that, the rest is history.
Yeah, I mean, the Drew Brees thing and the specifically the Patrick Mahomes thing, I think has just been so overblown out of the water and taken out of context. Maybe not even taken out of context. It's just been used as clickbait and content for so many places that it's just kind of become overanalyzed, I guess, in the sense of like that report. Did you see that report basically where, I don't remember who put this out there, but they basically said that Sean Payton had the same feeling about Bo Nix that he had about Patrick Mahomes. And you talked about him being kind of like super upset because he wanted Patrick Mahomes and they traded up over him. And obviously looking back on it now, it's going to be like, oh, well, of course you said you wanted Patrick Mahomes. Everyone said they wanted Patrick Mahomes. This has been a thing. Like if you go back and look at it in the 2017 draft, like it's been well established for several years that Sean Payton has been a fan of Patrick Mahomes. And it's not just like something that's recently coming out. It's like, oh, of course, everyone said that they wanted Patrick Mahomes. Everyone said that they got that right. And I think it's just been overblown. But the other issue that I have with people kind of criticizing that report is he's not saying that he thinks Bo Nix is Patrick Mahomes, not even remotely close. What he's just saying is he had a feeling about a guy in Patrick Mahomes in 2017 that had some controversy around him, wasn't necessarily kind of like looked at as a top guy. You go back and look at the rankings people had pre-draft for the quarterbacks in that draft. I've seen Deshaun Kaiser as like mentioned as the number one guy several times. Obviously Deshaun Watson was in that conversation. But Patrick Mahomes really was kind of either like quarterback 5. Sometimes people had him like quarterback 2, quarterback 3. Like he had some fans, but what I'm getting at with this is Sean Payton saw a guy who wasn't necessarily seen as like the number one dude in that class that he just got a feeling about of like, hey, there's something here. And he had that feeling getting with Bo Nix. Are the players the same? Absolutely not. But he just seems to kind of get that feeling of like, hey, I'm watching this guy. I'm talking to him. I'm learning about him. I'm seeing how he processes information. I'm seeing how he learns this offense. And I think there's something here. I have a feeling, and I'm going to take him at 12 because I don't want to, like, he's my guy. I'm not going to play a game. I'm just going to take him. I don't care. Sean Payton doesn't care about your big board, right? Yeah. He's just going to take his dude, and he took his dude. And you know what? I'm okay with it. And I'm excited to finally have something to look forward to in Denver. I think Bo Nix is going to start right away. He doesn't have a lot of competition ahead of him. People will be like, oh, well, Zach Wilson's just a backup. Like, you really wanted to go into the season with, obviously at that point we didn't have Bo Nix, but you want your backups to be Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci? Yeah. I don't think so.
Yeah. And the more things were trending, even we talked about it with Mike Kliss, right? We talked about it with Mike Kliss. He was even on, friends of the program, Let's Talk Broncos. He was even on there. he mentioned it, right, Brendan? Like, they have to add a quarterback, right? Like, they absolutely have to add a quarterback. And it did seem like he was alluding to the fact that even if they trade back, that he was rather confident they were going to be taking a quarterback. He didn't know whether it was Knicks or, or whoever it was, maybe Penix. But right, it seemed like he was pretty confident that they would be taking one. And so, and you said it. I mean, like, and we've all been saying this even in the offseason. Your room was Jarrett Stidham and Ben DiNucci before the Zach Wilson trade, which apparently took them a much longer time to consummate the deal and get it done with the Jets than it did the Russell Wilson trade, right? So that, like, the fact that was actually even in the trade space of like them actually acquiring Zach. So I think that, the room is certainly better. It's fun. You have a Wilson room and a Knicks room. Obviously creating a lot of a frenzy as far as, why did Zach Wilson choose number 10? And then obviously does that, tinfoil hat time. Does that mean that they're going to be drafting Bo Nix? Well, they still drafted Bo Nix anyway. But I will tell you on the record right now, as we sit on the very first day of May, it's somewhat of a hot take, but I have Zach Wilson being cut at the end of preseason, and I have the room being Jarrett Stidham and Bo Nix entering your room in week 1.
I mean, it could happen. I think Zach Wilson was just a case of like, hey, here's this guy that was drafted the number 2 overall pick that has those tools that we talked about that everyone wants, that had 5 offensive coordinators and a bad situation with the Jets and never really fully got there. Let's get him for nothing and just kind of see what he's like. I think he could maybe be your backup. I wouldn't be surprised if, I know stylistically they're kind of different. Again, you talk about the arm strength. I mean, Bo Nix doesn't have a weak arm. Everyone talks about like it's a noodle. He has the same kind of you know what he reminds me of? Who reminds me of in terms of his arm strength? He reminds me of Dak Prescott. Who complains about Dak Prescott's arm strength? I literally never see that mentioned. Does he have a rocket arm like Mahomes and Allen and Matthew Stafford? No. But he has an arm that's clearly good enough for the NFL to make the throws he needs to make. This is the other reason I think arm strength is completely overrated. And apparently this is like a trigger for me, and I'm just going to talk about it all day, is like, have you watched Patrick Mahomes recently? He doesn't throw the deep ball anymore. Like, yeah, he can, but that offense is so short passes and underneath stuff. I mean, yeah, they have really bad weapons pretty much outside of Travis Kelce, and that doesn't help, but the NFL has turned into, we'll see. The NFL has turned into, like, especially with the 2 high looks that they're getting, like, scoring has been down for the past several years. And it's turning more into kind of that underneath, shorter, intermediate stuff. And Bo Nix can make the deep passes. Like, if he needs to throw the ball 60 yards, he can. Is it going to be 60 yards on a frozen rope and it's a laser? No. Does it need to be? No. Like, I'd rather have the guy that can make the consistent reads and do what the offense needs to do in this short and intermediate game. That is the majority of what you're going to be running in your offense. I'd rather have a guy that can do that consistently than a guy that has so much arm that he struggles to take juice off of it, and he tries to throw like a 5-yard out route, and he throws it over the guy's head, or he puts too much mustard on it, and the guy can't catch the ball. And then, yeah, that guy can occasionally throw a super deep bomb, and it looks really pretty, and you're cheering because it's a sexy play. Give me the guy that can consistently do what 80% of your offense is.
Yeah. And to go a little bit of a step further on that, go look at some of the plays that he was even making. If you're going to maybe critique his game just a little bit, look, you and I maybe have talked a little bit about it, but JJ McCarthy probably had the best mechanics of any quarterback in this class. Bo Nix, there's probably a fair opportunity where he needs to work on his footwork a little bit, stay a little bit upright in the pocket, and not get a little bit, footsie wootsy, if you will, like a foot dance in times in the pocket where he doesn't need to like do some, things in the pocket with his feet at times. But but on those plays when he's throwing deep, Brandon, he's throwing like not with his feet planted, like, and he's throwing it 50.
Bo Nix's throws on the run, his best trade.
Right. And he's throwing it like 50 some, yards in the air, right? For air yards. So the idea that he doesn't necessarily have a strong arm is a big misconception. Also, too, in the NFL Combine, look, Joe Milton may have been clocked as far as the strongest arm in the NFL Combine, but you know what it was clocked at? 62 miles an hour. Do you know what J.J. McCarthy and Bo Nix were clocked at for speed at the Combine in terms of their strongest arm? I believe it was 61 and 60 miles an hour in terms of, strongest arm at the Combine. So, like,
that's just speed. Joe Milton can throw it flat-footed, probably 80 yards, but still, like, no one's going to be in the area.
But it's the idea of strongest arm. So, I mean, it's just like there's just that misconception going around with him, and I don't like it personally. I'm with you. And
you know where a lot of arm strength comes from? Your legs.
Yeah, right. Yeah, which is another reason why, like, him throwing on the run and making some of those plays, his feet are, not planted. If his feet are planted and he's able to throw a nice little frozen rope, there's a play of him that threads 3 defenders, in the end zone for a touchdown, I believe. For a touchdown, and actually, I think the play was to Troy Franklin. Funny enough, but
yeah, a lot of them were.
Right. But like he threads the needle and like he gets the job done. The point is he gets the job done at quarterback more often than not. That's the point. He gets the job done more often than not at quarterback.
He has he has enough arm strength. That's the short version of that discussion.
So maybe what we'll do is I'll tell you what, let's save talking about some of the draft and some of these other people's draft classes.
We have 4 months to talk about it.
We have more months to talk about it. Let's take a deep dive now. We teased one particular position group as far as a player that he possibly could receive, but let's go into the undrafted list. So it felt like maybe they made one move today. They signed BJ West, who was 5'8", 142 pounds, but they signed him, and I guess they texted him, or they cut him today. But Lincoln Victor,
they cut him.
I believe so. But West is cut. Blake Watson, we'll get to that name in just a little bit. Thomas Yasmin, also from Utah, very sneaky name. Dylan Leonard from Georgia Tech.
Do we have some kind of connection to Utah on the staff? Like, I'm legitimately serious.
I don't know. Obviously, you don't need to look no further than Tim Patrick, but I mean, that's kind of like, Frank Crum. A lot of people actually were wondering if he was going to get drafted. And so the Broncos go and sign him from the University of Wyoming. Another interesting name to certainly follow here, Jordan Miller, defensive tackle from SMU. Brandon Matterson from UTSA, University of Texas, San Antonio. Jalen Allen, another Memphis kid, the edge rusher from Memphis. Local kid, Alec Mock, the linebacker from Air Force. The linebacker, Lavelle Bailey from Fresno State. Cam Allen from Purdue.
Mm-hmm.
And then
I was going to say, tell us about Omar Brown and Quentin Newsome, Cam.
I'll get those out of the way first. So Quentin Newsome, I'll tell you, he played strictly outside at the University of Nebraska. He's also a twitchy corner. These two players just scream that Leonard was pounding the table for both of these guys to be in camp and undrafted free agents. We certainly know that the Broncos prioritize them. They were brought in for top 30 visits, right? They were brought in for top 30 visits, so they clearly valued them enough. Like Drain, Newsome is pretty twitchy. He's a very aggressive tackler. I think the one thing that Newsome has versus Drain is a little bit more size. I like the comparison that someone actually gave a couple days ago or as a week ago. They kind of compared him a little bit to Ojemudia, where you actually look at Newsome and he's a sound corner, but if you actually look at it maybe from like an NFL level, Newsome's a bit inconsistent at times. And I think that if you're going to maybe give an edge to a certain player between these two, is probably where you want to go with Omar Brown. Brown is a very versatile player. At the University of Nebraska, and even when he was at Northern Iowa, he was a defensive back / safety. And both Newsome and Brown played in a 3-3-5. Anybody that doesn't know, the 3-3-5 defense is probably one of the more fascinating defenses in college football. I wouldn't be surprised if we see some incorporation maybe at the NFL level, but basically what the 3-3-5 defense does is it prioritizes athletes on your field. And Brown, between Newsome, is an athlete. He is 100% a great athlete. Both are instinctual. They're high IQ. They really are great people in the room, if you will. So I think they do add value to your room. I'm curious to see what they'll do overall with the camp battle. I'm not expecting overall much because there's a reason why they were 7th-round draft picks. But it definitely kind of screams to me that these were players, especially Cam Allen from Purdue as well, coming from the Big Ten. These are players that I would assure you Leonard was pounding the table for.
Interesting. I don't follow Nebraska, so I don't really know
a
whole lot about them. But my guy, my dude, Blake Watson from Memphis was part of this class, and we talked about him. I talked about him on our sleeper episode as kind of a sleeper running back. Little did I know that we would end up signing him. But Blake Watson from Memphis, again, another one of those guys who started out as a wide receiver. And again, one of the very common, I guess, pieces of info that's out there about Sean Payton's offense is he likes the running back he's able to utilize in the passing game. I know we kind of have, again, that guy on Samaje Perine. We talked about the fact that Samaje Perine's on the last year of his deal. Audric Estime can kind of do that. I mean, I think you can see that Javonte sort of had a little bit of that ability. Jaleel McLaughlin could be that dude, but Jaleel McLaughlin obviously is smaller than maybe you would like if you're going to give him a lot of touches. So if you want to have a guy that you're going to use as your passing out of the backfield back, that could be Blake Watson. Blake Watson is, I think, kind of an underrated running back. I'm pretty surprised that he was undrafted. I was expecting someone would take him. He has deceptive speed. He ran a 4.39 40.
Talk about deceptive.
When I say deceptive, I mean, I think that's part of why he was undrafted. He doesn't look like he plays that fast. I mean, he's kind of the opposite of Audric Estime in that Audric Estime runs slow in testing, but he runs fast on the field. Blake Watson, I'm not saying he's slow, but I think he is slower when he plays than his 4.39 in shorts. That's why I say it's deceptive. It's like his speed when you look at his 40 time is like, wow. His speed when you look at him play is a bit worse. But at Memphis, he had, I think it was like, let me see if I can get this exact number. 6 yards per carry or something. And he had almost 200 carries. So like, it's not like it was a low sample size. Dude got after it and got a lot out of his runs. He finished with 192 carries for over 1,100 yards. He had 53 catches for 480 yards, and he had 3 receiving touchdowns. This is going to be kind of your, maybe not your change of pace guy. If Jaleel McLaughlin is your change of pace speed dude, this is going to be the receiving back in that backfield. I would not be surprised if, here's the thing. I don't know if we keep him because Javonte, Samaje, Audric, and if you're keeping Jaleel, like, are you going to keep 5 with Blake Watson? Could Blake Watson beat out Jaleel McLaughlin? I don't know.
Yeah.
I think there is at least a path here to Blake Watson being this team's almost version of Tony Pollard.
Yeah, it's a hard conversation because you knew where I was going with that. when we were talking about Estime, but when we were hinting at, Blake Watson, Brandon, and because you knew where I was going with it, and you can't help but think about Jaleel McLaughlin with the signing of Blake Watson. Jaleel was a fun, fascinating player when he was getting those touches with the Broncos, because he was a player that he hits a hole. It's one of the better things that Sean absolutely loved about him. He hits a hole, he hits that hole, or he even finds some certain holes that aren't there and creates it for himself. So he's a fun player in that regard. And I mean, and I think the thing that you can maybe say about, Watson is he has a little bit more size to him, right? He adds a little bit more weight. He's about 200 pounds, and you alluded to it. He runs, a tick under 4.4, and that's a fast back. Frankly, I would say you're talking about maybe a much more elusive version of an Antonio Gibson. Funny enough, Antonio Gibson went to the University of Memphis, a former wide receiver, converted running back. So I think that if there is some versatility here. Now, I don't know if they do take 4 running backs on the roster. They certainly won't take 5, because 5 is a little bit too much. But you cannot help but think about Jaleel. You really can't. But even then, maybe this is just more fuel to the fire to the idea that maybe we're looking at it from more of the vantage point that, as we said earlier, Javante's on the last end of his deal. Samaje's on the very last end of his deal. Estime is only 20 years old. Blake Watson is coming in on the older side, roughly the age of Bo Nix, right? 24 and a half years old. So it's really interesting as far as, what the Broncos' thought process is here and kind of what they would like to do. But I'm fascinated by this move with Blake Watson because I don't know. I'm very, very curious. Frank Crum is another one. This.
I don't know a ton about him, but I've seen a lot of people be like, "This was my dude," and I'm glad that the Broncos got him. Although I will say, we are now at
they haven't drafted a tackle since 2017.
Seven drafts in a row where we have not drafted a tackle. What are we doing? This was literally the best draft to take a tackle in maybe 20 years. Yeah. I understand you didn't take a guy at the top, but you don't take anyone? Come on.
Well, no.
Come on. I mean, it's kind of it was top heavy. I mean, I'm not saying that every offensive lineman in this draft class was elite, but it's just surprising.
But we'll know if Alex Polchewski replaces Garrett Bowles or they extend Garrett Bowles, we'll know. But as far as Polchewski, Crum screams a little bit like that as far as that signing where they were pretty fortunate to get him, and we'll see if the Broncos can stash him away, keep him on, and so I'm very looking forward to the idea of what they'll be able to do there. And Jordan Miller is going to be a player that is your practice squad player, right? And if you're going to look at maybe tight end, Thomas Yasmin is maybe a sneaky name to probably follow. Of course, CK from Utah, but a little bit of a tweener tight end, not necessarily a Dalton Kincaid, but a tweener tight end that, maybe they want to develop him a little bit in the same way that, Lucas Kroll was for Sean. But there's certainly some names that are going to be bearing watch as far as, come training camp and as we do a little bit more of a deep dive, because we're only in May 1st, guys. We're only in May 1st. We got plenty of time to certainly talk about it, and we know that the list we rattle off here is subject to change, of course, in the weeks and months that are going to be leading up to training camp. But any final thoughts, just overall, Brandon.
bow.
Yeah,
let's bow. I'm excited. I'm finally feel like I have something to root for. Even though I've critiqued the pick, people have critiqued this pick to death for years. What have we wanted them to do? Stop trying to trade for a retread. Go draft your guy. Get a young guy in here on a rookie deal. That's the best way to win. That's the best way to find your guy. And we did it. So I'm happy with that. And we'll see how this turns out. You never know. You never know. I mean, it feels like every year there's people that are taking the first round. You go back and look, so many first round quarterbacks. Yeah, they hit, but they also miss. But then there's also so many quarterbacks that are taken in later rounds that end up hitting. Dak Prescott, 4th round pick. Drew Brees, 2nd round pick. I mean, he was also second. He was the second quarterback in that entire class drafted. Spencer Rattler, which him going to the Saints to me is funny because Spencer Rattler and Dak Prescott are like the most polar opposite quarterbacks of all time. Did I say Dak Prescott?
I think
Spencer Rattler and Derek Carr. I'm having a brain fart today. Apparently, I keep saying Dak Prescott because Dak Prescott was the 4th round pick. I think Derek Carr is a 2nd round pick.
I'm
pretty sure.
Yeah.
Obviously, Tom Brady. We're not going to get into that, but
yeah,
you can hit on a quarterback in any round. You can miss on a quarterback in the 1st round. Take your guy, see what happens.
Let me ask you this, and again, we'll talk about the other draft classes, and we'll talk about it, here. But if you were to rank the quarterbacks as far as the best possible situation, people that are in the chat, feel free to comment on this too. If you guys, how would you guys rank based on, and again, if you're going to look at it from the entirety of the quarterbacks that were taken, how would you rank the quarterbacks in the, where they are, like as far as the overall fit for this team? Is Caleb Williams in a much better situation than, Drake May or, et cetera? So I'll take it off to you, Brandon, but how would you rank the quarterbacks that are in situations?
Rookies specifically?
Rookies, right? As far as this class going in.
I mean, to me, I feel like I have to put Caleb Williams first. Although I'm not gonna lie, I'm torn between him and JJ McCarthy. I think those two are in maybe 1A and 1B in terms of the best situation that they came into. The reason I say that, Caleb Williams, obviously the Bears this is a different team than the team that took Justin Fields just a few years ago. I mean, they finally have weapons for him. Obviously they took Rome Odunze, a lot of people's favorite wide receiver from that class. They have, they traded for Keenan Allen, right? Or was it a trade or was Keenan Allen a free agent?
It was a trade.
I think it was a trade, right? Yep. They traded for Keenan Allen. Keenan Allen still has a lot of gas left in the tank. He's a guy that is consistently your wide receiver 1 that gets 30% of the targets in that offense. So he's going to be great for Caleb. They have way more weapons around him than they did when they took Justin Fields, which was really the biggest issue with Justin Fields. And obviously DJ Moore. DJ Moore comes in from Carolina and finally gets at least a decent quarterback. And DJ Moore kind of explodes with Justin Fields. And I think DJ Moore, Caleb Williams, look out. Like that is a very deep wide receiver room. If DJ Moore, Keenan Allen are kind of your main 2 guys, and Rome Odunze, who is at the very top of a stacked wide receiver class for a reason, is your 3rd dude. Damn. Also, they have DeAndre Swift, who they also traded for. I'd say he has probably the number 1 situation. The reason I say that it was between him and JJ McCarthy for me is obviously he goes to the Vikings. The Vikings just know how to put together a good team, and they're just a great organization in general. Obviously, he has Justin Jefferson. They have too many JJs now. He has who was the running back that the Vikings signed? Did they sign Aaron Jones? Yeah, from Green Bay. Yep, Aaron Jones, solid running back. That can again kind of take some of that pressure off of JJ as a rookie. JJ again is a very pro-ready quarterback, though. He's going into a situation where he has weapons he can throw to and trust, but they're going to be able to take that off of him take a little bit of that pressure off of him with the running game. Also, there's Jordan Addison, who's probably going to just continue to improve as a wide receiver. And again, Justin Jefferson's going to take all of the pressure away from Jordan Addison. Jordan Addison might eat this year. TJ Hawkinson, great tight end. So JJ McCarthy and Caleb Williams to me are kind of the first and maybe second, or maybe 1A, 1B. And beyond that, I think, at the very, 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 very bottom of this list is obviously Michael Penix Jr. I feel bad for him. But Bo Nix might be, let's say that 1A and 1B, let's say they're tied, or Caleb Williams and JJ McCarthy, Bo Nix might be 2.
Okay.
To me. Just in terms of fit with Sean Payton, it's not really as much of the roster around him. I mean, not that we have a bad roster compared to the Bears and compared to the Vikings. I don't think we have as good of a roster around our rookie quarterback as those two guys do, which is why they are definitely 1A and 1B. But fit with Sean Payton, the guys that we do have, I just think it's a better situation than like Jaden Daniels is in with the Commanders. I don't really know how that's going to pan out. It's a way better situation than Drake May is in with the Patriots, who finally are drafting. I mean, they took him some weapons. They took some wide receivers. That's been like their Achilles heel. They can't draft a wide receiver. That's kind of been the running joke there. Obviously, Bill Belichick is gone. They have a new rookie head coach coming in. I don't know what's going to happen there. Michael Penix Jr., I'm sorry. Just blows my mind. So yeah, that would be my ranking.
You know, you can call it bias, but I feel like the top 2 for me are Bo Nix and JJ McCarthy. I feel like Bo Nix and JJ are going into really good situations for themselves. And that's my 1A, 1B. You can flip-flop it however you like, but I feel like Bo and JJ are going to really favorable situations. The reason why I probably would put Caleb at number 3 is just a little bit of what's gone on with Justin Fields. I mean, I want to make sure that the environment is solid for him.
But it's so much better than it was for Justin.
It is, but it's really easy to look at it on paper. And so I definitely see what it is. I can definitely see him succeeding. And that's one of the reasons why I have it number 3. Drake May is slightly low. You know, I think Drake May is even low. Washington did a good amount, you know, for him. So I think that
you mean Jaden Daniels?
Yeah, Daniels for Washington. I think that the wide receiver room that they have there, I would give it above May. So I would probably go with Caleb, then I would go Daniels, and then I would go May, and then Penix, followed by that. The Penix move it still baffles me. I mean, if Kirk Cousins wasn't there, I actually understand the fit. And actually, I love the fit.
I love Michael Penix.
I'm just saying,
why would you have both? I totally agree with you.
But I mean, like, I actually love the idea. Take the Kirk Cousins stuff out of it. I like how you kind of said that earlier, but like, take the Kirk Cousins stuff out of it. I actually love the idea of putting Penix in Atlanta. The weapons that he has, you're almost like putting him in almost an identical situation that he had at Washington. The only problem with it, though, is you pissed off your quarterback that you signed for a fully guaranteed deal.
That's not even the whole thing. Go ahead.
Well, it's part of it.
No, it is. You're totally right. Yeah, you're totally right.
Yeah. But, you know, and then do you plan on sitting him, meaning Penix? Do you plan on sitting Penix for, you know, all 4 of those years? Because at one point, the age conversation was not a true talking point for this year in this class. But you want to know why it was a talking point now? Because Michael Penix Jr. is going to Atlanta. And if he is sitting for 4 years, well, guess what? He's not going to be starting until he's around 30 years old, you know, which is darn near a veteran. So it can work out, but the high probability of that working out is very, very low. Now here's a plot twist. I actually, and you didn't put this in here, but as far as all the other quarterbacks, Pratt was a 7th round pick, so I'm not really throwing him, too much of a bone. I'll be honest. I actually have Jordan Travis and Spencer Rattler above Michael Penix, and actually maybe even slightly above Jaden Daniels.
Oh, I was just going with first rounds, but that's why I said that Michael Penix is the way down at the bottom.
Yeah, but I have Travis and Rattler above Penix and maybe Daniels to a degree, but I'm excited what Washington will do with Daniels. I really am. So
just final thing on the Michael Penix stuff.
Yeah.
The opportunity cost of what they have done is astronomical. I'm not even going to get into the offseason yet. You talked about, obviously, the quarterback that they just signed is upset. What does that locker room look like now? What did you just do to the locker room? I feel like you just threw a grenade into that locker room, closed the door, and walked away, and it just went off.
Yeah.
Kirk Cousins is going to be looking over his shoulder every second. Every time he makes a mistake in Atlanta, they're gonna call for Penix. Atlanta, as a demographic, is a very large African-American community. Michael Penix is someone that they identify with and probably would be excited to have represent their organization and their team. I love Michael Penix. I think he's a great quarterback. I think he honestly would be a great quarterback for the Falcons. I just think you're either putting him in a situation where he's not going to play for years and you're going to go with Kirk Cousins, or you're putting him in a situation where you just wasted $100 million guaranteed on Kirk Cousins because you're like, let's just go to Michael Penix and start the future now, because you're putting him in a situation where honestly he could win. If they didn't spend the $100 million on Kirk Cousins, and that's just the guarantees, there's more money than just that. It's just that was what's guaranteed. They could have spent that money on that defense that they desperately needed to improve. They could have went out and signed some high quality pass rushers. This team could have been, even if you took Michael Penix at 8 and you did that on the defense in the offseason, this team could be set up to potentially win the division.
Yeah, and you're one.
NFC East is not a tough division.
NFC South.
I'm sorry, NFC South. NFC East, it was Commanders. NFC South. The Panthers, you basically only have 2 other teams in the division. Let's be real, because one of them is the Panthers, so they don't really count. So it's the Buccaneers and the Saints, and the Buccaneers and the Saints are kind of in just provisional 9-8 mode right now. I just don't understand it.
Yeah, you and I talked about it.
I like both picks individually in a vacuum. Both moves make sense, but they don't make sense together.
And the way to probably preface it this way is, you and I talked about it from the Broncos' perspective, how they will evaluate quarterbacks, because there's a lot of ways that, what will they do? How will they evaluate the quarterback room? How will they evaluate things overall? There's a lot of ways they could have done that, right? There were a lot of situations we talked it through. You go through and you go the trade up route. You trade up for those quarterbacks, the Caleb Williams, the Jaden Daniels, Drake Mason. You go up and you trade up for one of those guys. You get your guy that way. You trade your assets, or you fall in love with the Jordan Love situation, right? You fall in love with the Jordan Love situation. You stash him away, get him the chance to learn the system, be a sponge for that system, and then when that time is right, you move on from the quarterback you currently had there, and then you move on. Look, that may have been the scenario that Atlanta was talking through in their brain, right? Was the Jordan Love situation. And I realize age is just a number, and I hate to bring it back up again, but you don't have that conversation with a guy like Michael Penix, especially when a lot of people, even if he was supposed to be taken in the second round or the latter half of the first round, or even not getting past 13, right? There's a lot of people's opinion was he's not getting past 13. And maybe for a Broncos side of things, the fact he actually didn't get to 13, maybe it's actually a good thing, is that he didn't actually get to 13. But like you're very much stunting his development. And I like how you even put it. I really didn't even think too much of it from the locker room side of things, but you are truly throwing a bomb in that locker room, and it's exploded in their face. And this is very much a move. And Gage mentioned this last night. It's very much a move that very could seal the fate for Terry Fontenot in Atlanta. And not just Fontenot, but just nearly every single person that's a part of that Falcons organization.
I heard that Fontenot and the head coach were both on the same page with the pick. It's the owner, Arthur Blank, who had no idea. Did you see the video of like Fontenot basically trying to explain it to Arthur Blank?
Yeah.
And they were like, Arthur Blank was like not having it. He was like pissed.
He literally gave a blank stare. Yes, Brandon.
I'm not even going to speak.
I don't know, right? It's me and my puns tonight.
Anyway, 0 out of 10 move. 0 out of 10 move. Makes no sense.
Yeah, I mean it was really puzzling.
And if you're worried about Kirk Cousins being, how old is Kirk Cousins? 36.
Yeah, he's like 35.
35. Yeah, coming off of being 35, coming off of an Achilles tear, and that's why you took Penix. Then don't sign Kirk Cousins.
Right. Yeah. Well, we certainly hope it works out.
If Fontenot gets fired, do you think we could get Kirk Cousins for like a 7th round pick?
A lot of people were speculating, Kirk Cousins possibly to Denver. So
that's just his final. Just flip off Arthur Blank and just say, "Hey, give me my pink slip." But I'm just gonna screw the organization again, and I'm gonna trade him. I mean, it's stupid, but I don't understand.
What was your grade? What grade would you give the Broncos draft?
Incomplete.
Smart answer, but I mean, if you were to actually, put forth your Pro Football Focus grade of not a 90 or whatever, but like your actual grade,
I'd give him a B.
Okay. I did a B plus. I think it's very evident that it is very much we believe in Bo Nix. And
Bo Nix hits A plus.
Yeah, it really doesn't matter after that. If Nix hits, I mean, yeah, you're talking about everything else will either fall into place, and frankly, probably talking about if Bo Nix hits, you're also probably talking about a decent possibility, a stronger possibility of Troy Franklin hitting as well.
Is that why you said frankly?
No, I did not.
Sure, it isn't.
But no, I do think though that if Nix does hit, you're looking at the strong possibility that Franklin will hit also, or at least be a very solid contributor for you, or at the very least he.
Here's the thing: if Bo Nix hits, all of your wide receivers hit because he raises all boats.
He does.
Courtland Sutton's going to have a better year. Finally, he deserves a good quarterback.
Or I mean, he had the best year of his career this last year.
He did.
But yeah, you're talking about him actually being a 1,000-yard receiver again. You're talking about, the possibility of him or others possibly being into that conversation finally. But yeah, it's an exciting time. People that are in the chat, before we go, let us know what the grade is. for the Broncos draft. We're certainly looking forward to breaking it down even more. We want to thank you guys so much for hopping in the chat. There was a lot of people hopping in the chat. We had Ray. It seems like it's been a little bit since I've actually had the chance to talk with you, Ray. Got a chance to talk with you. Ray says BB plus. That's kind of like where we're at. Actually, I would say it's a fair amount of maybe where Broncos country is at. Would be BB plus. Biggie Bronco. Landon was in the house. Big Mike. Hopefully you succeeded on your final. Looks like Muhammad Badri was in the house. Graham, obviously, asking about the draft. Clayton, as usual, was in the chat. Very thankful to have him in. It was a lot of fun, and we're certainly looking forward to breaking not just the Broncos draft more and more, but I think maybe next week we'll take a little bit more of a deeper dive in the NFL draft as it goes, and maybe kind of look more at the enemy lines, behind enemy lines, get a chance maybe to look at the Chargers draft that Brandon absolutely loved in a bad way. Like he actually hated the draft because of how good it was. So we'll talk about the Chargers. We'll talk about the Chiefs and how the Buffalo Bills apparently have decided to help out 2 AFC contenders in 1 month with the trade of Stephon Diggs to the Houston Texans, and then the bizarre trade to the Kansas City Chiefs that helped them draft Xavier Worthy. So we'll talk about that. Then we'll talk about the Las Vegas Raiders, where they certainly drafted Brock Bowers. But after that, kind of interesting draft, to say the least, for the Raiders after Bowers. But it's gonna be a lot of fun, and we'll certainly talk about some of those other players and teams and players that went to other teams in the NFL draft. Thank you guys so much for hopping in, and we will see you guys next time on another edition of the Manely Broncos Podcast.
Fast lane when I pass in the street, bag of money in the passenger seat. Simcoe's been asking for me on the road from the west to the east. Way up, I might never come down, cause the coast's racking up the flame out. So high, I might never come down, so what, this is my lifestyle.